Welcome everyone to our webinar, Entrepreneurship in Pandemic Time. I'm so happy that finally the time arrived for our webinar. And we are hosting this webinar here from Beirut, Lebanon, from the Middle East University. And this is a continuation of a series of webinars on the issues of pandemic times that we started last year. We did 3 webinars last year, and this is the first of the continuation of this series this year. I want to warmly welcome each one of you, and I hope this event will be a blessing that will bring hope, that will bring encouragement, that will bring ideas to each one of you who are struggling with the challenges that this pandemic is bringing to all of us, but especially to you as an entrepreneur. I want to welcome here to the stream Dr. Philippe. How are you, Dr. Philippe, tonight?
Good evening from Beirut.
Thank you so much for joining.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Dr. Carlos. Good evening, Dr. Philippe. Hope you're feeling good. I'm presenting from Lebanon, and it's been an honor to be here with you.
Antun Casas is the secretary of the MEU Business Club, and he is looking forward to a blessed career in business ahead of him. And I want to start, before we introduce the topic and before we introduce the panelists, I want to start, as we do with all our events here at Middle East University, with a word of prayer to invite God to be with us, to help us with the connectivity that is we are struggling, and for this event to be a blessing. Let's pray. Father in heaven, thank you because you are our loving Father, and because you want to give us a wonderful future. I want to pray that you honor us with your presence in this webinar, that it can be a blessing for all the people that are watching from across the world, and that this event will bring hope, that it will bring encouragement to their lives, to their futures, as we struggle with the challenges of the pandemic. We thank you in the name of Jesus. Amen. All right, we are happy to host, as I was saying, this event from Middle East University in Beirut. This is one of the oldest universities in Lebanon, established in 1939. It has already 82 years, and we are hosting this event in the Department of Business Administration. And even though it's an old department, we just started a few weeks ago our social media. So I want to invite you to follow us in our MEU Business Department Facebook and Instagram accounts, and that you may also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You are watching now from either our YouTube channel or our Facebook account. You can subscribe so you can follow more events, more trainings to upskill yourself, and we will be also posting regularly information and videos to enrich your experience. I want to now invite Dr. Philippe to please introduce the topic and to welcome Mr. Badri, and then I will introduce the second panelist, Ms. Rania.
Thank you, Carlos. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight from Beirut. It's a pleasure to be with you from Middle East University. Thank you, Dr. Carlos, for organizing this webinar. Let me introduce quickly the issue of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is a risky affair. It's a matter of starting new businesses that originate in the crucible of human suffering. In pandemic times, we are in the middle of human suffering. Entrepreneurship aims at satisfying needs in the midst of suffering and pain. So this is a wonderful opportunity. This is an extraordinary opportunity to provide innovation, to provide new methods, new firms. Each time we catch an opportunity to start a new business, there is a startup phase. The startup phase is risky, and the startup phase requires a few dollars from your pocket. Let me submit to you, how many dollars does it take to start an enterprise in the middle of suffering? Can you start a new enterprise with $100? Can you start with $50? I used to say you could start with $10. Today, in pandemic times, I'm proposing to you that you could start with less than $10. What can you do with less than $10 in your pocket to start an entrepreneurial affair? I propose 3 items. Item 1, very up to date. You could open an internet page. I'm being told it costs next to nothing, probably even free, that you can initiate your own media platform. This is how you could start your contact and your channels with your community. Item 2, wonderful for lockdowns. For less than $10, you can read a book. I'd like to share with you some of my favorite entrepreneurship champions. This is Robinson Crusoe. Interesting read. Fantastic entrepreneurial champion. Here's another one. Lee Iacocca. Lee Iacocca sounds Japanese. Actually, he is of Italian descent. He is the ultimate American entrepreneur in the automobile industry. You're more classic? How about take a look at the French, Les Miserables? Wonderful read. Does this have anything to do with entrepreneurship? Here's another one. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I have ultimately, if you would allow me, from the Adventist Middle East University in Lebanon, another fantastic read. Al-Kitab al-Muqaddas, the Holy Scripture. Of course, it's always a wonderful resource. Yes, for less than $10, you could build your own skills. Item 3, for less than $10, you can attend this webinar. I understand this webinar is almost free, if not fully free. There is a whole series of generating your self-worth, renewing your resources by attending a webinar like this. At this point in time, it is my privilege to introduce a fantastic entrepreneur from Lebanon. Our first speaker tonight will be Badri El-Maoushi, a young executive leader and a consultant who works collaboratively with clients across the globe to help them develop and implement corporate governance, in addition to promoting and implementing anti-corruption mechanisms in public and private sectors. He possesses an extensive training and facilitation capacity with large and small organizations. Badri joined Tamaya's team in 2015 and has been developing new corporate governance services in partnership with the International Finance Corporation, IFC. He has served as executive director of the LTA, Lebanese Transparency Association, Lebanon's chapter of Transparency International. And he is the executive director of the Institute of Directors in Lebanon from 2005 till 2012. During that time, Badri was also working in partnership with the International Finance Corporation on corporate governance projects in Lebanon, which aimed to offer Lebanese and Arab companies with a variety of services and implementation plans, as well as training courses for board members and for top executives. Since 2012, Badri consulted and provided advisory services on project management and anti-corruption programs to a variety of international organizations as well as individuals, banks, companies, and NGOs in the MENA region. He also served as a regional consultant for the United Nations Development Program, UNDP. In addition, Badri has been serving as a board member of Lebanon Transparency Association since 2016 and as chair of the board from 2016 till 2020. It will be a privilege to listen to Badri after his presentation we will open the floor for discussion and questions. Welcome, Badri.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to each of you and Middle East University for inviting me, and looking forward to this webinar.
Let's introduce the second panelist, and then we can follow our program. Welcome, Badri, and I'm so happy that you are with us. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Rania Hoteit. How are you, Rania, tonight?
Good, how are you? It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you so much for honoring us with your presence, both of you, Badri and Rania. It's a pleasure for us to have you in our webinar. And I want to share a few facts about Rania now. She's a multi-award-winning serial entrepreneur, global impact leader, speaker, advisor, and author with recognition from several organizations like the White House, the United Nations, the UK Parliament, and she has received several awards, for example, the Global CEO Excellence Award and other prestigious awards. She is the founder and the CEO of ID4A Technologies, a technology company whose developments are widely adopted, disrupting traditional supply chains, revolutionizing production processes, creating significant environmental, economic, and social impacts worldwide. Under her leadership, ID4A Technology has been recognized by the White House Office of Science and Technology for fostering the development of advanced manufacturing. The company was also named among the 2016 Best Entrepreneurial Companies in America by Entrepreneur Magazine. They were honored on the Elite 2018 Inc. 5000 list of America's fastest growing private companies, recipient of the 2019 Real Leaders 100 Top Impact Companies Award, as well as the World's Best Emerging Design Technology Company Award in 2019 by Lux Leading Designers Awards. More recently, ID4A received the Best in Business 2020 San Francisco Award and also the 2020 Technology Innovator Award by Corporate Vision. I want to tell you also that Rania is very committed to SDGs number 5, 8, 9, 10, and 12. And more than 1,600 businesses adopted sustainable practices, more than 285,000 people gained employment, and more than 900,000 people were provided secure working environments through her actions. Additionally, she has contributed to reducing labor exploitation in global production pipelines by improving the skills and working conditions in nearly 2 million people so far. It's my privilege to welcome you, Rania, and I want to tell the audience, the participants, as you are there from your home, from your office, wherever you are, write in the comments below, whether you are watching in Facebook or YouTube, from where you are watching this webinar, from which country, from which city, so then later we can acknowledge you and see the diversity of the audience that we have tonight. Now we will give the time to the two panelists to present. We will have first Rania and then Badri, and we are going to have around 20 minutes of presentation from each one of them, and then 10 minutes for questions and answers. So for you, the audience, as you listen to the presentations and questions come to your mind that you want to address to Rania or to Badri later, please post them here in the comments and we will be addressing those questions as time allows after the presentation. Time is yours, Rania.
Thank you so much, Carlos, for this warm introduction. First of all, let me just start by saying how grateful I am for the opportunity to be joining the MEU community today and to have this chance to give back to young entrepreneurs and business students in Lebanon during these difficult times, and also to be able to share my expertise and insights with the wider community that are joining us online from different countries and different parts of the world. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and I look forward to contributing today and sharing. And I want to start by talking about our current times. Speaking of entrepreneurship, it's a wide topic, and especially when we're talking about pandemic times. If we look at human history, crises have always been pivotal in developing our societies, especially the crisis that we are experiencing right now. It has a significant financial and human toll, stranding assets and human capital, and it's been causing significant social and economic dislocation. It's always in times of crisis and in times of disruption and dislocation as such that we find that these dynamics that are labeled as negative or disruptive or destructive, these are the ingredients for success. These are the ingredients for innovation. These are the ingredients for disruption from which new business models and ways of innovating and leadership that they emerge. We do have lots of challenges, of course, that we are going through, but we need to acknowledge that with all of these profound undercurrents of change that have been shaking the foundation of our structures, our organizations, our governments, and even our own existence as humans, that's been bringing so much value to us, whether we realize it in the moment or not. I believe by the end of this phase, and as we move forward through this period, the transformation that we're going to experience and the change that we're going to be able to accomplish is going to be tremendously positive, despite how dark these times might feel like. If we go to the next slide, speaking of crises, I want to touch base on economic crises. We are at the moment, of course, experiencing economic crises globally, worldwide. And in general, economic crises are periods of creative destruction. This is where new ideas and ways of doing business come to the forefront. And creative destruction, for anyone who's not familiar with the term, is a phenomenon that's famously described by the Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter in the 1930s. Although he was not contemplating creative destruction as having in mind that there will be a global pandemic in 2020 that's going to put a halt on many economic activities. But at the same time, we need to acknowledge that the theories that he had brought to the table, or the theory might prove itself to be correct as we move forward post-pandemic phase. At the moment, and I'm going to speak particularly about what's happening in the United States, for example, we don't have data available yet to measure the number of businesses that have been destroyed in 2020, mainly because data for businesses that close without entering bankruptcy has been lagging. But early evidence shows that by the end of 2020, around 9.1 million small businesses have been either temporarily or permanently closed. 9 million jobs were lost during the turndown. So this is major destruction, major disruption when it comes to the destruction of businesses and also the destruction of employment opportunities and economic opportunities for workers. Next slide. We are definitely at a point of uncertainty over demand recovery that will remain in some sectors for years to come. And that said, despite the business formation growth that we've seen last year, and I will elaborate on this shortly in the following slides, the recovery may be hampered by the millions of these old businesses that are being destroyed, along with their role in value manufacturing and production value chains. Additionally, if we look at during protracted COVID-19 recovery, tough times in doing business during this recovery period will dampen the survival rates among startups. So we are looking at some serious challenges as we move forward when it comes to the recovery period. And if we move to the next slide, if we track back, however, a little bit in history, this is not new. What we're going through right now in terms of the destruction of businesses in economic crisis is anything but new. Companies and firm debt have spiked up in previous economic crises in the United States and around the world, with millions of workers losing jobs. So what we're experiencing is not new historically. Next slide. Back to the concept of creative destruction, and speaking of Schumpeter's theory, as I mentioned, it may actually prove itself right in the post-COVID-19 period. And new businesses may make existing industries more efficient, as well as create entirely new industries, especially as governments make an effort to ease their path. And in fact, if we really look at what's happening currently or what's been evolving over the last 12 months, many companies have reflected a shift to new technology-based ways to carry out the same business. Firms have also been reborn after investing in digital applications. Workers have learned how to use a remote database and reach their customers over social media and other digital marketing means. Offices have or was becoming virtual even before the pandemic, and that may remain post-COVID-19 in some sectors of the economy. Currently, some of the entrepreneurship by necessity in the past is now absorbed by the gig economy, working for companies such as Lyft or DoorDash and others. These jobs will also remain after COVID-19, especially as we are entering a phase of vaccinations increasing, which will create an increased demand for such services as well. And the changing nature of some sectors as well, it suggests that new companies may become market leaders very quickly. So as much as we have disruptions and destruction and challenges, we are seeing the emergence of opportunities and change in a positive direction as well that we need to be aware of. Moving to the next slide, talking about the pandemic economy in the US particularly. The coronavirus crisis may have accomplished something that a decade of economic growth could not possibly achieve. It spurred a boom in US entrepreneurship also around the world in particular areas. Despite the health catastrophe and one of the worst economic downturns in modern history, we are seeing a startup business activity growth in the US last year, which is one of the biggest increases on record, especially that over the last several decades, we have experienced a slump in business formation. Despite the prominent Silicon Valley success stories, the reality is that the rate at which Americans have started companies have been steadily declining over the last decade before the pandemic. So having this shift and change is actually pretty incredible. In the recent study that was released by the Peterson Institute for International Economics, it showed that American startups grew from 3.5 million businesses in 2019, for example, to 4.4 million in 2020. That is a 24% increase. The number of new businesses also increased in Chile and Turkey and the United Kingdom, while maybe other economies were not as vibrant. For example, a new business formation declined by a quarter in Portugal and Russia. China, startup activity has barely budged over the last year. The growth was only by 3% in the first quarters of 2020 relative to 2019. So all this data that we are seeing from 16 advanced economies suggests that there has been a significant divergence in startup activity, with the United States, of course, leading the largest increase of any country in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is OECD, if you're familiar with that. So speaking of these changes, in contrast, between the changes that are happening, the increase on one end, the decrease and the decline on other end, there are still opportunities for growth for countries like Germany, for example, that has been suffering from a decline of 4% in startup activity. But with the government's effort to create something called the Future Fund program for startups in 2021 that should be helping to fund and support entrepreneurs, France has also similarly pledged to raise a $5 billion for startups to invest in entrepreneurs and help to boost businesses. So we are seeing that in countries where governments have been proactive at supporting entrepreneurship, there is much more hope and revival and much more hope and survival for these businesses as well. Moving to the next slide, again, this is based on the report Simeon Dyankov mentioned in that report that This is the first recession in the last 50 years where the supply of money is larger than before the crisis. So again, we've seen with the 2020 boom in the US stands in contrast to the last recession when startup activity fell. In part because of the financial crisis, it made it harder for new entrepreneurs to get funding. But in these days where there has been so much more supply of money and support from the government, with trillions of dollars in government support for US households and businesses, that has definitely generated much more positive impact than previous crises. And also it gave the US, I believe, an advantage over other countries that haven't been able to provide the financial support that's necessary to maintain the growth in entrepreneurship as well. Next slide. I want to talk about what entrepreneurs can do. We understand that we have challenges. We understand that there is a crisis. We understand that there is decline. We understand that there are revolutions in certain parts. There are governments collapsing. We understand that we are at a time of tremendous challenge, but also we are at a time where innovation in the time of crisis can actually set us forward and push us forward into the future at much higher accelerated rates because of the intentionality in creating change and that need for survival as well. So at the end of it all, there are three possible scenarios that entrepreneurs may be experiencing at the moment or they will be experiencing as we move forward in this crisis. Some entrepreneurs might say that, okay, we can't weather the storm. We should throw good money after the bad money. We shut down, we go, there's nothing we can do. Another scenario is there are entrepreneurs who might look at their businesses and say, okay, this is the situation now. It might last another 6 or 12 months. So now is the time for us to get stronger, to get leaner, and to reset our plans or adjust our plans in a way that we can prepare ourselves for the future. And the third likely scenario is for entrepreneurs to find opportunities to pivot. And to pivot is to ask, what are the assets and capabilities that we have at an individual level, at a business level, if there's anything we can do to survive the storm and potentially thrive as we move into the future. And there are multiple aspects that entrepreneurs need to be looking at in this particular phase. I want to be talking about these particular points that you see on the screen right now: survival versus growth, positioning, messaging, and value proposition, mindset, people management, priorities, and I will talk about a triage process, leadership, how to create certainty and building resilience, and the importance of innovation. I believe that to achieve greatness in uncertain times, entrepreneurs need to develop a resilient, purpose-driven mindset. First of all, if we were to look at the current business that we have, it's important for entrepreneurs to be able to define their priority is to survive at the moment, or they have opportunities for growth. So if we are in survival, then we need to focus on how can we cut down our costs, how we can trim all things that are unnecessary, all indulgences, all luxuries, and really focus and nail down our cash flow on what's most important in order to survive as long as possible. The second option that we have as entrepreneurs is to look at our businesses very dynamically and find opportunities for growth. And if there are opportunities for growth, I would advise that you invest in your existing customers, you invest in sales and in marketing, and try to increase your revenue rather than slow down on investing in this area. The second area, which is related to your value proposition, we are at a time where things are changing. So it's important that through the positioning and the messaging of the business, that you are adjusting your language and your communication in a way that convey that you are serious about helping your customers and making any adjustments that you can in order to fulfill the promises of your business rather than give up quickly. The third point is mindset. I believe there is nothing that can be done in any way, in any business. There is no success that can be achieved at a personal or at a business level if the mindset is not in the right place to drive success and to drive evolution. So it's important to have a positive mindset, to have a growth-oriented mindset, so you continue to adapt and learn, and to also be courageous in terms of decision-making, in terms of setting priorities and goals, and making sure that you are in the right state emotionally and mentally in order to manage your people, which is the next point I want to touch base on. When it comes to people management, I believe, especially in times of crises like this, the most important aspect is to maintain and build a certain level of trust and accountability within your team without going into micromanagement, without going into sabotaging behaviors. So using your capabilities as a leader to ensure that your people are equipped with the tools, they have a good understanding of the goals that you're trying to achieve to maintain your business or to grow your business. It depends on where you're at in survival or in growth. And make sure everyone knows exactly what they need to deliver in order to keep the business moving forward. The next one, which brings us to setting priorities, or what is called the triage process. Triage is an interesting term. It's a term that comes from urgent medical care. And basically what triage means is really a process of prioritizing who are the patients that are in dire need for support and help, and how do we start to prioritize giving the treatments and the care for the people that need it the most based on the severity of their cases. What that means to business really is that you might not be able to save every employee, you might not be able to save every client, you might not be able to save every contractor that you have, but you have the capacity to set priorities and make sure that you can do the best you can with the capacities that you have and with the people that you can maintain forward. This discussion leads us to leadership, of course. When it comes to leadership, there are particular areas that is important for entrepreneurs to focus on in this phase, especially being honest with your team, being honest with your clients, being honest with the public, with the media, where you're at, what you're trying to achieve, what's working, what's not working, and making sure that you create certainty within the walls of your business, despite of all the uncertainty that's going on outside. We don't know what the government is going to do. We don't know how the economy is going to evolve. There's a lot of things that are outside of our control, but we are in control of the decisions that we make within the four walls of our business and within the parameters of our own teams and our own infrastructures. And in that sense, it's very important for entrepreneurs to be able to maintain a level of resiliency where they're adaptable to change, they are willing to change, they are willing to look at new ways to do business, they are willing to make tough decisions very quickly, and they are willing to keep leading their companies and their teams forward, and most importantly, to keep leading themselves in order to be able to support others. The next point I want to talk about is innovation. And we can go to the next slide from here. In past crises, we can see that companies that invested in innovation, they delivered superior growth and performance post-crisis. Why this information is important? Because entrepreneurs need to also focus their energy on maintaining their innovation through the crisis that's happening right now. In history, organizations that have been able to maintain their innovation focus through financial crisis, for example, in 2009, they have emerged stronger. They were able to outperform the market average by more than 30%. And they were able to continually deliver accelerated growth over the subsequent 3 to 5 years. And this is a great lesson for entrepreneurs to learn at this time in order to understand the value of innovation if they wanted not to only to survive through the crisis, but also to experience growth post-crisis. Next slide, please. So I spoke earlier about pivot as the third scenario that entrepreneurs could be experiencing. The current crisis had significantly exacerbated and accelerated its disruptive force. There are sudden pivots during the COVID-19 that we have been witnessing, and some of those include changes to sales models, need for new offerings, rapid changes in customer behavior. We've also seen influx of competitors from different industries. So while some companies might be uniquely positioned to be quite responsive to the crisis, others may not find a realistic pivot. But every business can gain long-term advantages by understanding the shifts that we're observing during this pandemic and really understanding the opportunities that such shifts present. Because this is where you might have a blind spot in understanding, okay, no, my business, I can do that. I can make this decision. I can make this change. But if you really start to examine these particular shifts, you might be able to identify opportunities that you didn't see before, and you might be able to innovate with your business model and with your sales models and create new offerings that didn't exist before, and to rapidly respond to the changes in customer behaviors and compete with others that are going into your space from different industries or within the same industry. So it's important to really think about what entrepreneurship also means for us as entrepreneurs moving into the future. If we move to the next slide, I want to talk about the unknown factors to entrepreneurs at this time. I think that the pandemic has presented tremendous uncertainty to entrepreneurs. And in times like this, it's critical for us to temper optimism with a sense of realism that there will always be something outside of your control, always. Normally, entrepreneurs have a tendency to really find it very hard to think that there are external factors that could possibly crush their businesses, or there are factors outside of their control, because we're so optimistic and because we're so solution-driven types of individuals. So we're always seeing the bright side of things, and we might get blindsided by the possibilities of interferences that are outside of our control. So I want to talk about the V-Day model. It was presented by Wharton University. Basically, entrepreneurs, I believe they should start considering or implementing this model for opportunity identification and moving forward and from wherever they are at the moment. V stands for value and entrepreneurship and is a function of 3 buckets of factors. The first one is I, which is idea, the idea itself. The idea is looking at the main idea that you have and then think about it. Is it solving a particular pain point? Is it going to bring value and add value to customers? The second factor is the D, which stands for development, or the development of this idea, and thinking about what you can do with this idea using your skills and capabilities to reach a certain level of development with this idea that it could maximize on the value that you're trying to provide. And E, it stands for exogenous factors, or those are the factors that are outside of your control. As I mentioned, most of the times entrepreneurs get blindsided by their optimism that they don't take into consideration unforeseen circumstances or external factors. And of course, the pandemic is a very unusual situation. It's not something that anyone can necessarily anticipate. But it's important to learn from what this pandemic has taught us about unknown circumstances or or external factors and start to think about ways where we could implement some kind of crisis management considerations and make sure that we integrate those strategies within the development of the ideas that we have and the businesses that we have. Next slide. I want to discuss also what are the critical practices that entrepreneurs need to start implementing. Those critical practices will have the greatest impact on innovation success, especially for entrepreneurs who are really set on emerging as leaders from this crisis. Companies can rely on the 8 essentials of innovation as a formula and a roadmap for success. This framework was released by McKinsey & Company, and I believe that it's absolutely a precious tool. Mastering these 8 essentials would lead to significantly higher performance with organizations, and being able to master these innovation essentials is now more important than ever, especially as entrepreneurs and companies prepare to return to growth coming out of this crisis. So in this particular framework, they talk about these 8 steps. First, aspire, which is basically making sure that you questioning if do you accept innovation-led growth as absolutely critical, and have you cascaded targets that reflect this? So finding answers, choosing, are you investing in a coherent time risk balance portfolio of initiatives that are resourced to win? 3, discover. Make sure you can answer the question, do you have a differentiated, actionable customer, business, market, and technology insights that translate into a winning value proposition? Number 4, evolve. Do you create new business models that provide defensible, robust, and scalable profit sources? Number 5, accelerate. Do you beat the competition with fast and effective development and launch of innovation? Scale. Do you launch innovations in the relevant markets and segments at the right magnitude? Extend. Do you win by creating and capitalizing on external networks? And finally, mobilize. Are your people motivated, rewarded, and organized to innovate repeatedly? Obviously, I'm reading off the slide just to make sure that everyone gets to really follow in case they can't read it. But these are incredible questions to answer and an incredible guideline that I believe that every entrepreneur should master and spend the time to really master these innovation essentials and get down and answer these questions robustly. So I hope this presentation gave you some understanding of not only the current situation, but also of the challenges and the opportunities that you have in the future, where you can develop your skills and your mindset and your capabilities in order to thrive moving forward, and how you can start to bring more realism into the execution of your ideas and how you get organized for success. And it's important to start with a mindset that, yes, these are difficult times. Yes, we have challenges. But at the same time, if you understand your value, if you understand the value of your business and what you bring to the table, you will not allow yourself to stop, and you will not allow yourself to settle for less. So keep the grind, keep the hustle, and keep the optimism with a realistic understanding of what you need to do in order to thrive and succeed in this new environment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rania, so much for these wonderful presentations. And now it's time to take a few questions from the audience. So we are going to be reading now your questions that you have been posting here, but also I want to acknowledge the diversity of the audience that we have here. We have people from Lebanon, several people from different parts of Lebanon. We have people watching from Erbil, Iraq, from Sohag, Egypt, from Argentina, from the USA, Michigan, from Finland, from Nairobi, Kenya, from Washington in the US, many countries, from Dubai, from the UAE, everyone, be welcome, and I hope you are enjoying this webinar. Now, Dr. Philippe, what questions can we address from the audience?
Yes, wonderful, Rania. Thank you for the audience. Rania, your presentation was extraordinary, definitely comprehensive, and I wish we had a full day to look deeply into the models that you proposed. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. There are several questions that came along the chat line. Because we have a limited duration webinar, let me combine them in two categories. So let me summarize the many questions we had into one question, combining several questions about the US economy, and another one combining several questions about the Lebanese economy. First, in the US, there are 4 combined questions. Now, all of them say, Rania, addressing you, what is your opinion beyond the models and beyond the theory of the impact of this pandemic era on 3 things, which are extraordinary? One question is about taxation. One question is about exchange rates, I mean, the rise of the dollar. And another question is about innovation. And somebody is saying, isn't innovation in the US due mainly to the fact that the pandemic was slow at first in the first year? If you want to take a try at those.
That's a pretty complex question with multiple aspects. Okay, I'm going to actually focus on the innovation aspect, because there are so many variables to talk about when it comes to taxation and when it comes to numbers, especially as things are evolving in very dynamic ways. But when it comes to innovation, I believe that beyond the models and beyond the existing models and beyond what's happening at the moment, I believe that there are many opportunities to innovate regardless of where you are on this planet. If you are in the US, or if you are in an emerging market, or if you are in a declining or collapsing economy, such as what's happening in Lebanon right now, we do have an opportunity to find ways for solving problems. Especially that we have so many problems to solve, we need to focus on solution creation processes. So if you are an entrepreneur who has the drive to make a change, or you have an idea, instead of sitting and looking at, okay, things are falling apart and things are bad, and let's look at the problems in a very objective manner. Let's dissect them. Let's analyze them. Let's look at our reality, because each economy is different, each country is different, each government is different, each system is different, each society is different. So let's look at the factors that are relatable to us and that are relevant to us, and really try to create solutions that can be conducive to the particular environment that we live in. So there isn't one answer to this kind of question, especially that the US economy is very different than the economy in Lebanon, especially at this time. But I'd be happy to dive deeper into answering this question in the comments later on, so people can actually read them at a different time, just for respect of the limitations we have right now.
Thank you, Rania. Actually, you did answer both sides of the questions. Carlos, do we have more time to dig deeper into the Lebanon issue, or shall we postpone this to later?
I think we have 2 minutes.
2 minutes, well, that's plenty. About the Lebanon situation, Rania, the question is about the pivot mechanism that you mentioned several times.
Yes.
Lebanese culture is very prone to innovation, to risk-taking, to entrepreneurial spirit. Lebanese history has adapted quite well throughout the years to adversity, to risk. However, what's new now is the complexity beyond the pandemic. There is a multi-layered critical build-up that Lebanon is not anymore in adversity, it is in misery, beyond poor, beyond poverty, and the trauma is on the culture and on the pivot. We need to absorb the punch to be able to pivot and redirect in entrepreneurial. Can you give us a flame of hope regarding the pivot in a spirit of adversity and misery?
Yes, yes. I'm all for giving hope. First of all, I want to touch base on the idea that we are in a stage of misery, which is beyond the stage of adversity, which I absolutely agree. But at the same time, we want to make sure with the Lebanese spirit, with the entrepreneurial impulses and the creativity that the Lebanese population has, whether that's inside or being immigrants outside, there's a tremendous enterprising spirit that the Lebanese exude, which is a very unique part of their identity. And I believe that right now, in the middle of the misery and in the middle of the point of collapse, that we really do not have an understanding where it's going, how far it's going. We are in a very absolutely uncertain time, which is very difficult for young people and for entrepreneurs and even for professionals and people that are seasoned in different sectors to really see where we're going from here and if there's a possibility to make a turnaround. But I believe that because we are in a point of misery, we have nothing more to lose. There is nothing more to lose. What we need to do is to focus on our risk-taking spirit, our enterprising spirit, our creative capabilities, our positivity and optimism, which I travel the world, and there are few places that I've been to where I've seen this energy of positivity and optimism that I see in the Lebanese people. And I truly mean it, not because I am Lebanese, but I truly mean it objectively. So we need to leverage the aspects that the positive, the strengths that we have, and hopefully we can start to detach ourselves from what the government can do, what the government cannot do, because this pandemic has proven to us that we need to become more independent from existing structures, from any limiting beliefs and any kind of overly restrictive types of infrastructures that are limiting what people can do. So if we can detach ourselves from the failure of the government and the failure of the system, which inevitably it's going to have to dissolve and we have to build something new, we cannot wait for that to happen. What we can do is focus on our own individual economies. So if each person starts to really nail down on their own talents, on their own gifts, the value that they could bring to the table at an individual level, they will find ways to monetize, to create opportunities, to build businesses, to create solutions, despite of the misery that's going on. And it's now in our hands, at an individual level, more than ever, to create those independent streams of income for ourselves that are not reliant on what governments can give us, that are not reliant on what organizations can give us, that are not reliant on companies to hire us, because so many companies shut down. So what can we create? What value do we have to bring to the table? The smallest talent that you might consider a hobby, it could be an opportunity for you to turn it into an income stream. So this is my take on this. This is where we are at. Individual initiative, communal spirit, taking the optimistic, positive, enterprising, creative energy and move forward with it despite the misery, despite the uncertainty, and despite the collapse that's going on in Lebanon.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful. There are several quick questions. We will not try to address them now, but I want to tell you that there is one question from Billy in Maryland about entrepreneurial ethics. There are a couple questions, one about housing crash and one about social entrepreneurship. We'll keep the hunger, the thirst. We'll come back to those maybe later. Thank you,
Sure.
Rania. Back to you, Carlos.
Thank you.
Thank you, Felipe. Thank you, Rania, so much. Maybe if you are willing, if you are so kind, you can answer some of the questions that were addressed to you in the past few minutes here in the chat.
Sure.
Now, we will move to Antum presenting Badri.
Hello, everyone, again. Welcome, Mr. Badri, for being with us tonight. I want to invite you to share your screen and present. Thank you.
Thank you, Anton, and again for the invitation to join you this evening. It's a pleasure to be with you, and it was a pleasure to listen to Rania, a very interesting presentation. I've prepared my presentation around the key discussion points or questions which were shared with me, which in a sense mainly focused on how not only the pandemic, but the economic crisis, economic, financial, and social crisis in Lebanon has affected our activities, what we're planning to do as a consequence, and what we are doing in effect, and maybe conclude with some key takeaways or tips or advice on trying to navigate these incredibly difficult times. I don't think that anyone who's attending today needs to know the extent of the crisis in Lebanon. It's a multitude of crises happening all at the same time, unprecedented in the history of this country, that's for sure. And we're seeing the impact of that on the private sector specifically, but also on individuals across Lebanon. Tamayaz specializes in providing advisory and training services. There's one division which is focusing on soft skills, so the learning and development division. There's one division focusing on human resources solutions for companies, and a third division which was created in partnership with the International Finance Corporation, which focuses on governance. And we had seen, in a sense, specifically on the governance services, a growth in demand in the last 4 years. And that was very encouraging, and we were very concerned towards the end of 2019 and as the pandemic began in early 2020, that this was going to have, obviously, a dramatic impact on our activities. And there's no doubt that it did, because when we as individuals are faced with such a situation, our priorities change. And of course, training and advisory services might not be so much of a priority. So that did impact us, and we had to think of how to react to that. And to react to it from several perspectives. First of all, to keep our team motivated with a sense of purpose. Second of all, to try and generate new business and new ways of doing things, in effect, not necessarily counting on the Lebanese market. And as a consequence, we ended up doing both. So to give you some examples, we've been working, specifically the Learning and Development Division of Tamayaz has been spearheading some initiatives to support the private sector in different areas of Lebanon. So for example, one of our initiatives is called Rise Up Lebanon, which has helped more than 200 small businesses to rebuild or rehabilitate after the massive explosion on August 4th. Many businesses were hit. Of course, many homes were hit as well. And a great deal of the aid was going towards individuals in helping them to rebuild their homes. And we felt there was a need to help also those smaller businesses to rebuild their shops. And so far, more than 200 businesses have been helped through that initiative called Rise Up Lebanon. We're also working, I should mention that these programs are funded by different parties, like Impact Lebanon, like Konrad Adenauer Foundation, and others, Stand Up Women, many others as well. And the idea is to work collectively in such moments, to try and have a sense of purpose and to give back, to support others who need help in these times. Another initiative we're doing is we're working with support from GIZ to support 30 small and medium enterprises in increasing their distribution channels and hopefully increasing their revenues. And we're also continuing to try to work on initiatives like this. So we're actually in discussions right now to focus on other sectors such as the agriculture sector, agro-food processing and manufacturing, and select companies there that we can work with to support them. The primary purpose being to create jobs, to increase revenue, to enable export of Lebanese goods and services. So that was on one front, in a sense. And this was very important for us as a team to feel that we're doing something that adds value in times like these. From the business side of things, we obviously had to rethink our strategy, and I was very glad to hear Rania mentioning how you need to be creative, you need to be innovative, you need to be flexible in effect in these times. You cannot control all of these elements, and there is no point in stressing and getting frustrated over something that you can't control. That's going to be, I think that's a very important takeaway, is that's not going to add value. It's not going to help to get frustrated, to get stressed about things that you can't control. And as Rania said, there are many things which you can control, and that's what you need to focus on. So in a sense, we revisited our partnership agreement with the International Finance Corporation to include several countries in the region so that we could start offering our services beyond Lebanon, because in corporate governance, all of our services are developed by the IFC in effect. So we have an agreement with them on where we can use those services or offer those services. So we were able to add all the GCC countries, and we're hoping, and this has already been done now, and we're beginning to see clients coming from those countries such as UAE, Kuwait, and others enrolling in our programs, which is great to see. So it's at the beginning of that growth curve, I hope. And also we're hoping that this expansion will move into North and Saharan Africa by July. So in effect, these were not really choices or luxuries for us. It was an obligation. In a time of survival, we have to be pragmatic. We have to be practical. Either you close up shop or you change the way you work. And hopefully the sector that you're in will enable you to find opportunities. And I think this is the key thinking process that has to take place in such moments, is that you need to take a moment to stop and think of what are your strengths and weaknesses internally inside the organization, and what are your threats and opportunities in the environment in which the organization works. And when you do that, which is we will call a SWOT analysis, then you begin to narrow down on your strategic options, and you can have alternative options. I think that's the important thing in these times, is to think openly and to think out of the box, to be innovative and creative, as Rania said. And then by working collectively with your team, with your partners, which is something we're doing very much, then it becomes possible to open new markets, in effect. And some of our key partners here have been the Lebanese League of Women in Business, of course, the IFC, and new partners with whom we are signing partnership agreements in the GCC, so that we can, in effect, not only benefit from their database of clients to promote our services through that database, but also they can benefit from the clients who enroll in our programs for the services they offer on placing individuals or headhunting individuals for C-suite positions or board positions across the region. So in a sense, trying to find that win-win situation with your partners and just getting on with it, in effect. So it's been surreal in a sense to be able to go through this phase, but staying calm and collected, because there are many moments when you want to throw the book in the fire, if you like, and just walk away from it all. But I think that perseverance, resilience is a key component in all of this, and I think that also collective action is a key component, not only in getting through this crisis, but also in working together throughout the private sector to try and put pressure on the politicians which have created this crisis to find a solution out of it. So there's a need to go beyond just helping each other out. I think we also need to stand together as a private sector in these times and insist and speak out loudly on our aspirations and what we think the government should be doing to rebuild this economy, to rebuild stability. So, in effect, some key takeaways would be to, first of all, keep calm and carry on. Second of all, to rethink your strategy. You can't continue business as usual in such times. You really need to sit down with your team, brainstorm, think what needs to happen, and communicate very clearly and fairly and transparently, as Rania was saying, with all your team members and your partners outside the organization, and to do the best that you can. I think that failure is not a problem. I think that trying or not trying, there's the problem. I think this is where we need to sometimes motivate ourselves and mobilize ourselves, because when we look around us, it's very easy to lose hope. And so, in effect, that's also a challenge, in effect, and a key takeaway is to just try and keep trying, in effect, and to weather the storm and to hopefully come out stronger on the other end, precisely because of the way you approach it. So reviewing the strategy is the key part of all of that, and being very flexible. What you decided 2 weeks ago might have to be reversed 2 weeks later. So in a sense, you need to be flexible. You need to be very aware of what's happening in your environment, the threats and opportunities that are there, because this is one of the key ways in which you can navigate through such crises. So I'm going to stop there, because I think, if I understood correctly, we're going to be concluding around 8 o'clock, and I want to make sure that we have enough time for questions.
I want to thank you, Mr. Badri, for this powerful presentation. I want to greet everyone watching us, from my friends, family, people watching us also, from many countries like Dubai, Lebanon, Morocco, Iraq, Egypt, and many more. So I want to thank you again, Mr. Badri, and I want to thank again Ms. Rania.
All right.
Thank you.
I want to see now if you have any question for Mr. Badri. I see a question here from Mina. Can entrepreneurship work better in a country like Lebanon right now?
That you could answer this question in many different ways. I think it's a question of looking for the opportunities. There are always opportunities, and the question is how you approach that. For those of you who watched Schindler's List, at one point Oskar Schindler says that the most amazing opportunity is about to start. and everyone is wondering what he's talking about, and then he says war. So in effect, that man found opportunity in wartime. That's to tell you how often or how you will find opportunity anywhere. So, for example, let me give you an example of one of our partners, a Lebanese company called Technica, which makes production lines. So let's say that I own a beer factory. They would be the ones who come in and build the machine that produces the beer and bottles it and packages it and all that. So it's all done, all automated. So robotics machines in effect. And they decided at the beginning of the pandemic to begin developing ventilators. They didn't do it for commercial reasons. They wanted to see if they could do it. They did it for CSR purposes, corporate social responsibility purposes, and for a challenge, in effect. And they succeeded. And it's not an easy challenge, because not only do they have to learn how to design and build such a machine, but then they have to work with many different entities, including the regulators, to get this machine awarded a certification that enables it for it to be used by hospitals, etc. So there's one example, in effect, where even in times like these, a company can find difficult crisis, specifically from an economic and currency perspective. But that doesn't mean to say that there are no opportunities. And as a consequence, the system that we live in is going to change. Lebanon, as it was, will not be Lebanon as it will be. And in that transition, there will be opportunities also. So in effect, it's important to see, to be aware of what's happening in your environment, in your business environment, to stay informed, to work, so that you can spot those opportunities and seize them when they come. So my answer would be yes, even in such a drastic crisis as Lebanon is in, there are still opportunities, certainly not as many as we.
Okay, thank you, Badri. We have here another question from one of the participants. How
Can you hear me?
Yes, it was cutting a little bit towards the end, but now we can hear you. The question is, how effective is entrepreneurship in poor countries?
Okay. I think entrepreneurship, you can find entrepreneurs have the most unlikely places. Yeah, it's more the impediments to entrepreneurship come from different areas, such as, for example, from the legal and regulatory framework and all the
I think Mr. Badri's internet is a little bit unstable right now. We are
maybe while we're yes, Badri is back on. Okay.
Yes, Badri. It seems your internet was a little bit unstable. Yes, now we can hear you.
Yeah,
because we were not able to get it.
I'm in the middle of I'm in the middle of a major storm up here in the mountains, so it's affecting the internet more than usual, which is already not good in Lebanon. But I was saying that, I think, you'll find entrepreneurship in any country, whether it's poor or rich. The impediments are not from individuals. They are from the legal regulatory framework, or sometimes even from a lack of access to education. I think, but also, of course, economic opportunity and access to economic opportunity is not fatal in poorer countries. But I mean, even if you look at some of the most entrepreneurial, widely, very well-known kind of businessmen in the world, like, for example, Richard Branson. Here is a man who was expelled, or who not expelled, but who left school at the age of 16, and his headmaster told him, you know, you're either going to end up a millionaire or in prison. And he nearly did end up in prison because of a problem with taxes when he was very, very young. But at the end of the day, he succeeded and he navigated through all of that. So an entrepreneurial spirit that learned how to grow very effectively over time without a high level of education. So I think the impediment is more economic opportunity and, of course, legal and regulatory hurdles sometimes in registering companies, etc.
Thank you, Badri. We have 5 more minutes until we finish the webinar, so maybe we can take a couple more questions from the participants for either Badri or Rania. We have one question here that said, how can businesses grow if the purchasing power of people is decreasing? Who wants to take this question?
Carlos,
maybe Rania, what do you think?
Do you mind to repeat the question? It's cut off a little bit on my end.
Okay, yes. How can businesses grow if the purchasing power of people is decreasing?
Mr. Badri, you want to take this one if you can hear better? I still can't hear most of the sentence.
Did you get it, Badri?
Carlos, while Badri is checking the question,
Carlos, would you? Should I? I'll.
Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead, please, because I did not catch it. I'm so sorry. It's cutting off.
Sorry, shall I go ahead?
Yes, go ahead, Badri. Yes.
Should I go ahead? Well,
yes,
I think, you know, the purchasing power, yes, the purchasing power is decreasing, but it's not disappeared. And the purchasing power will increase, hopefully, with time, in time again. The question is, so let me give you an example. Has grown by being entrepreneurial. So, for example, tutors. We all know, for those of us in Lebanon, want something delivered, we go through tutors. Whether it's we want something from the supermarket, or we want something from a shop or a restaurant. So here is a delivery business that learned how to grow in these crisis times. So I think the sector that you're in also determines whether there is opportunity for entrepreneurship or not. Today, if I'm in the business of selling fabrics and I would rethink my strategy, because there isn't going to be much demand for that today. It's not a primary priority for Lebanese families today. So where are the Lebanese, even with their decreased purchasing power, where are they spending their money? On what are they spending their money? So there's a need to do some research to see what they are spending their money on, if it's not at the levels as it were before. And by entering those markets, by entering those sectors, then you can hopefully find something that can grow over time. So just some examples in effect.
Okay, maybe meanwhile I can take one more question here from the audience. It says, do you think that more focus on risk management in businesses could have saved more businesses during the pandemic times?
I can answer this question since I can get it this time. Sorry for the first time. During my presentation, I did touch base on one particular area that entrepreneurs normally miss, which is really calculating or taking into consideration possible crises or external factors and other circumstances that might intervene in the progress of their businesses. So I do believe that a certain level of anticipation ahead of time for most businesses could be definitely a lifesaver if there was some kind of, not necessarily extensive planning, but in the military, for example, they always take in consideration when they're going on certain operations, they always account for time lost if people make mistakes on the mission or if there's something that goes wrong. So there's never a really like set time or plan that's never adjustable. So when you're creating a plan for your business, it's always a smart move to consider some of the worst case scenarios, even if they may never happen, but kind of anticipate ahead of time and have some strategies in place to manage those risks and the crises when they arrive. To answer the question in brief, yes, I believe some businesses can be saved if they had crisis management strategies in place ahead of time that are set for the worst case scenarios, such as similar to what we're going through at the moment.
All right, thank you so much.
If I may add to what Rania is saying, Carlos, I fully agree. First of all, more importantly, I wanted to link this to good governance. In the flagship program of the IFC, which is a certification as corporate director with an online examination and everything, one of the key modules is risk management. Actually, another one of the key modules is setting the strategy. And it's by setting the strategy of the organization that you are going to have a clearer indication of what risks you will be exposed to when executing the strategy. So there is no way for effective risk management if you do not have a well-documented strategy which identifies the risks that your strategy exposes you to. So all of this, in effect, is something that boards in companies and leaders in companies need to be, even when they're entrepreneurial and they want to be flexible and move quickly, you need to do this, as Rania is saying. You need to have a clear strategy and you need to document each one of your risks, calculate them, give them a rating, and have a worst case, best case scenario so that you can situate yourself on what the risks would be under the scenarios. And for each risk identified, have a mitigation plan. It takes time, and there are individuals who specialize in this, but you need to mitigate those risks, in effect. And so that when something happens, you are ready for it, or you are readier for it than you could have been by doing nothing. So there's no doubt that risk management is essential, and you could actually push this all the way, this argument, by saying that if there had been effective risk management in our banking sector, we would not be in this mess. Because it's unacceptable that these banks have exposed themselves to such high risks without having any mitigation in place. Rocket science to know that the Lebanese government is corrupt. So if the Lebanese government is $80 billion in debt, how is it going to reach? Is a very valid question. And when such a large proportion of the debt is held by Lebanese banks, then by clear indication, it's clear to me anyway that their risk management was very, very weak.
Okay, thank you so much, Badri. But I want to give you, each one of you, Badri and Rania, one more chance. If you would like to give one piece of advice from all these ideas and suggestions that you have been sharing and kindly offering to our audience tonight, if you had to choose one thing that would help an entrepreneur out there on the other side of the screen, what would be that one thing that each one of you would like to share?
Personally, the main advice that I would like to give and share before we end the session is that this is the time to sharpen skills to learn new skills, because without approaching this new phase of our personal lives and of how businesses are run and the global economy, we might lose our chance to have a space in this new economy as it evolves post-pandemic. So new skills in order to adapt to change, I think this would be the most important and most critical aspect of being able to move not only past difficulties, but also to be able to integrate successfully and effectively in the economy as it evolves.
Thank you, Rania. Badri, you want to share one last thought, advice?
Invest in your team right now. You need to have your team around you if you want to move, if you want to seize opportunities, and sit with them and your partners to revisit your strategy. I think in times like these, you cannot as usual, and any company tries to do that is doomed for failure. You really need to be very flexible. You need to be creative, innovative, and you need to move fast because the situation is changing underneath your feet, especially in Lebanon. So we have it even worse, in fact, in Lebanon than in the rest of the world. But you really need to have your and be ready to react quickly to changing situations, and to do it collectively with your team and your partners.
Okay, thank you so much, both Rania and Badri, for your participation tonight. We have been honored with your experience, with your idea, with your suggestions. Thank you also, Dr. Philippe and Antun, for co-hosting tonight this event. I would like to end with one sentence that I copied from each one of you. Badri, you said, this is the time to speak loud your aspirations, to review your strategy, and to be flexible enough to reverse. And Rania, you said, to achieve greatness, you need to develop a resilient and purpose-driven mindset. So probably as a conclusion, this is a special time in the world for entrepreneurs and for small and medium-sized businesses. This is a time to rethink, to upskill ourselves, to spend time in developing our soft skills along with our hard skills that have to do with the strategy, the business model, and so on. So we are going to close here. Or anyone, you want to say goodbye to the audience?
Yes, I'd like to say thank you so much for, first of all, to you, Dr. Carlos, to you, Dr. Philippe, and it was such a pleasure to be with you today and to be able to connect with the MEU community and to everyone else who had joined us from different countries today as well. I also want to thank everyone for the kind comments that they made and for all the interesting and valid questions that they commented with. I promise I will get back to each one of you with the answers that you deserve once I have the attention and the time to give you the answers that you need. And thank you so much to all of you for being here today.
Anybody else want to
Likewise,
farewell the audience?
Thank you very much to each of you. It was a pleasure to join this discussion this evening, and wishing you each great success in all your efforts. It's not an easy time, but with perseverance, we're going to get there.
All right, stay tuned for our next webinar. Our next webinar will be on April 21. We are going to be tackling the issue of how the pandemic has affected employees with remote working specifically, and also what changes in the technology side companies are adjusting to. So stay tuned, subscribe to our channel, follow our new Facebook and Instagram pages so you can be announced and notified of our upcoming trainings and webinars. Have a good evening.
Also, I want to thank you all. I want to thank you I want to thank this team for presenting this webinar. Also, I want to thank Ms. Rania and Mr. Badri for the presentations, and you as well, Dr. Carlos and Dr. Philip. Thank you for tonight.
Bye, everyone.
Right, thank you.
Bye-bye.